My name is Sylvia Whitman. I am 68 years old, a retired school nurse, and a widow for almost 4 years now. Last spring, I attended my only son's wedding. His name is Noah. The invitation came with a nice font and a soft gold trim. No mention of me helping raise him alone for 18 years. No space to write in feelings. I wore the pink dress I had been saving for something special, the one with soft pleats at the waist. I baked banana bread the way Noah used to love it in high school, still warm from the oven. I even ironed the old cardigan with the pearl buttons he once said made me look like a mom from the old shows. I arrived early. It's a habit I never broke. The wedding was held at a fancy lakeside lodge, the kind with wood beams and a view of the water that made everything seem more expensive than it probably was. The young girl at the front desk handed me a name tag. She smiled, clearly having no idea who I was. My tag said only Sylvia Whitman, no ribbon, no mother of the groom. Inside the venue, laughter floated above soft string music. The servers walked around with tiny spoons of something I couldn't pronounce. Everyone seemed to have a place, a cluster, a connection. Noah stood at the front of the room with his new wife, surrounded by people I'd never met. He didn't see me come in. One of the wedding planners waved me toward a table near the back, tucked away behind the bride's extended family sign and the groom's co-workers banner. My table had no label, just a plain white card with my name on it, no title, no mention. I sat between a man who sold insurance and a woman who raised alpacas in Vermont. Both were polite. Neither had met Noah. During the toast, someone asked when the groom's mother would speak. The bride laughed and said, maybe later, and then moved on. No one ever handed me the mic. Spring in northern Michigan isn't warm. It's quiet, not the peaceful kind, but the kind of quiet that feels like being forgotten. My house sits near a still lake, surrounded by pine trees and memories. It used to be filled with noise, my husband David fixing the porch steps, Noah thudding up the stairs after soccer practice. Now, it's mostly me, banana bread cooling on the counter, and tulips that refuse to bloom when they should. David passed away almost 4 winters ago. He had a kind heart and a quiet mind. He liked things orderly, predictable. After he was gone, the house stayed standing, but the energy shifted. Empty chairs started meaning more than full ones. Noah calls less and less these days, but I get it. He's grown. He has his own life. That's what we raised them for, right? 3 weeks before the wedding, Noah called. His voice sounded distracted, excited, maybe, but not present. She said he was marrying a woman named Claire. I didn't know much about her, only what came through occasional mentions and photos I had to zoom in on. I asked if he needed help with anything. He said no, they had everything covered. I offered to bake something for the rehearsal dinner, banana cream pie, his favorite as a kid. He chuckled and said, "That's sweet, Mom," like I had offered something outdated, something irrelevant. He didn't ask which weekends worked for me. He didn't ask what I thought about the venue, or the dress code, or if I'd need a hotel room. The whole conversation lasted under 10 minutes. And when I hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time, like maybe it might ring again and offer a different version of the call. That was the moment something started to ache, not loudly, just a quiet shift inside. Like being told gently that your chapter in someone's story is over, but no one had the heart to say it out loud. Still, I stayed hopeful. I chose my dress, hemmed the sleeves of my coat, and cleaned the porch like someone expecting company, because some part of me still believed a wedding might bring us closer again. 1 week after the wedding, Noah called. He said he wanted to have me over for dinner, just the 2 of us. He said Claire would be out with friends, and we could catch up, just like old times. His voice was cheerful but controlled, like he was practicing warmth instead of feeling it. I said yes, of course, no questions asked. That evening, I wore the cardigan I had on the day I brought Noah home from the hospital. It was soft around the wrists now, a little faded, but still held its shape. I baked a batch of oatmeal cookies and wrapped them in foil. The drive to his new house was smooth, if quiet. His neighborhood was neat, a row of brick homes with matching porch lights and lawn signs. Everything looked designed to feel safe. Noah opened the door with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He gave me a quick hug, more polite than warm, and led me to the dining room. There was a table set for 2. A bottle of wine already uncorked. But there was no food, no smell from the kitchen, no bubbling sauce or warming bread. Just a neat stack of papers placed beside the salad plates, clipped together with a blue pen laid diagonally across the top. Zuski poured wine, asked about the drive, complimented the cookies. His tone felt rehearsed, like a waiter reading from the daily specials. Then he gestured toward the papers. He said it was nothing major, just something for peace of mind. In case anything ever happened to me. Something to make things easier. It's just a durable power of attorney, he said, as if that phrase meant nothing more than a family recipe. I nodded and picked up the packet. The language was thick with legal terms: financial authority, real estate management, immediate effect, no expiration. It didn't say son, it said agent. It didn't say protection, it said control. I looked at him. He smiled again and said, "No rush, Mom," but the pen was already uncapped. I set the packet down gently. I told him I'd take it home and look it over. He nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. When I got home that night, I didn't even bother to take off my shoes. I sat on the couch, coat still zipped halfway, hands resting in my lap, like they didn't belong to me. The house was too quiet. Not the usual quiet, but something heavier. Even the ticking clock in the kitchen seemed to pause, as if it didn't know what to say either. After a while, I stood and walked down to the basement. My knees ached with each step on the old wooden stairs. The air down there had that cold stillness basements carry, part dust, part memory. I moved past the laundry machine and reached for a cabinet behind the paint cans. I hadn't opened it since David died. Inside was a small metal box. David always said if anything happened to him, I'd find what I needed in there. I never thought I'd actually open it, but that night something told me it was time. The lid creaked as I lifted it. Everything inside was neat, labeled folders, financial statements, a letter at the very bottom, addressed to me in David's handwriting. My hands trembled. The letter was short, barely a paragraph. He wrote that he knew I'd never ask for help, even if I needed it, that he had set things up so I would never be cornered or dependent. He asked me not to tell Noah, not because he didn't love him, but because, in his words, money changes people or reveals who they already were. I unfolded the documents. There were 2 accounts in my name, investment portfolios, mutual funds, an annuity tied to a small rental property in Texas. The total value, over $7 million. I stared at the number, closed the folder, then opened it again. I didn't cry, not yet. I didn't feel relief either. What I felt was something deeper, like holding a secret too large for the room. That night, sitting on the cold basement floor, what weighed most wasn't the money, it was what David had seen coming. He had prepared for a future I didn't want to imagine, but now that it was here, I realized he had given me more than security. He had given me a choice. The next morning, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of papers Noah had handed me. It wasn't just legal language. It was a message, one I could finally hear clearly. I pulled out an old birthday card tucked in the back of the drawer. On the back was a number: Carol Mahoney. We hadn't spoken in years, not since her husband passed. She used to be a trust and estate lawyer before she retired. I called her. She picked up on the second ring. I didn't need to explain much, just the basics. She listened, then said, "Come by tomorrow. Bring everything." Her voice was steady. No judgment, just clarity. The next afternoon, I sat in her small kitchen surrounded by books and soft lamp light. I handed her the envelope from the basement. She read through every line with the focus of someone who had seen too many families fall apart too late. When she finished, she looked at me and said, "You have more power than you realize." The accounts were solid, the investment secure, the legal footing strong. Then she asked, "Do you want to protect it?" I said yes. She asked who I wanted to name as beneficiary. I said, "No one, not yet, maybe never." She didn't flinch, she nodded. Then she helped me set up a private trust, one only I could access, shielded by legal safeguards no one could sidestep. She added a medical clause: if I were ever incapacitated, it would take 2 independent physicians to confirm before anything shifted. At the end, she slid the papers toward me and handed me a pen. I didn't sign because I was scared. I signed because I was done pretending I didn't see what was happening. The stroke of that pen was quiet, but it was the loudest boundary I'd ever drawn in my life. A boundary that said, I am not a liability. I am not yours to manage. I am still here and I decide what happens next. When I left Carol's house, the wind felt different, not softer, sharper. Like something inside me had finally stood up straight. A few days later, Noah texted again. He said he wanted to try a proper dinner this time, no paperwork, No pressure, just us. I waited a few hours before replying. Then I typed one word, sure. I didn't tell him I wouldn't be coming alone. Carol met me a block away and parked across the street. We agreed she wouldn't come in, just sit nearby, ready if needed. I wasn't scared, not anymore. Noah opened the door barefoot, wearing a button-down and no shoes, like he was still that boy who used to run down our hallway giggling. The kitchen smelled like garlic and roasted vegetables. There was bread on the table. Real food, or at least the look of it. We sat. Small talk first. He asked if I'd read anything good lately. I mentioned a library book. He nodded but didn't ask for details. Then his eyes flicked to the side table. Another stack of papers, this time smaller, clipped and neatly arranged. He said he had spoken to a friend who worked in elder law. They'd recommended a simpler version of the previous documents, nothing binding, just provisional. Just something to keep things smooth, he said. He slid the papers toward me. I didn't touch them. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded document of my own. I laid it gently on top of his stack, just paper touching paper. He looked confused. Then he unfolded it. It was a formal notice of trust execution. My signature at the bottom. Full transfer of all assets into legal protection. Revocable only by me. He blinked. Once, twice. Then his jaw tightened, just slightly, like he'd bitten into something bitter. I looked him in the eye. I said I appreciated his concern, that planning was smart, that I had done mine. Everything was final. He asked if I had spoken to someone. I said yes. A friend. Someone who understood what preparation looked like without pressure. The room went still. That's when Carol walked in. She smiled, greeted Noah politely, and introduced herself. Then she looked at me and said, "We'll be going now." I stood up, took my coat, and left with her. I didn't look back. The next morning the cold arrived early. The kind that settles into the corners of the house and lingers, quiet and stubborn. I made toast, poured a glass of orange juice, sat at the kitchen table but didn't touch either. At 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. One message, just one line from Noah. "You made this harder than it had to be." No hi, Mom, no apology, just that. I stared at the screen, set the phone face down. The toast had gone cold. The juice no longer looked refreshing. There was no follow-up, no explanation. But I knew what he meant, not disappointment, not regret, just control slipping away. A door he assumed would always stay open had just shut, and he didn't like it. Later that day, I walked out to the garage. I hadn't touched the boxes in years. I pulled out a photo album. There he was. Noah at 5 years old, cheeks red from snow, holding a toy truck, grinning with that wide, gap-toothed smile I used to carry like armor. That smile had gotten him everything. Not because he demanded it, but because David and I gave it, thinking love meant saying yes before he ever had to ask. I turned the pages slower after that. Later, I scrolled through old text messages, ones from birthdays, holidays, graduation, the ones where he used too many exclamation marks, where he still said love you at the end. One by one, I deleted them, not out of anger, out of clarity. The only one I kept was a video. Noah at 10, telling a ghost story with a flashlight under his chin, my laugh echoing in the background. I watched it twice. Then I closed my phone. That night I didn't sleep, but I didn't cry either. The bed didn't feel empty. It felt honest, like it finally belonged to someone who had stopped trying to be everything for everyone. That was the part no one warns you about, the grief that doesn't come from death, but from the realization that what you gave in love was used to leverage you. That's a kind of silence only a mother can recognize and survive. I moved at the end of February, just before the last of the snow melted. The new house was smaller, older. It sat on a quiet street not far from the lake, with a crooked mailbox and shutters that rattled in the wind. But it felt right, like it had been waiting for someone who no longer needed space to entertain, only space to exhale. I didn't bring much: a photo of David for the bookshelf, a few boxes of books, the recipe cards with smudged ink, a chipped blue kettle, and a ceramic owl that had never scared a single bird in its life. Most mornings I walked to the library on Main Street, not because I needed books, but because I liked the sound of pages turning around me. I started helping out at the front desk, nothing official, just enough to feel useful, just enough to stop reaching for things that no longer reached back. That's where I met them. Women like me. They didn't arrive in groups, they came alone, quiet, steady, some read. Some stared out the windows, some just sat like they were waiting for something they weren't sure would turn. There was Margot, who walked with a cane but only used it near the door. June, who brought peppermint tea in a thermos marked with her sister's initials. And Helen, who made quilts from her late husband's flannel shirts. We didn't talk much at first, but then, slowly, we did. One afternoon, Margot asked if I wanted to help with the raised garden bed behind the library. I said yes before I even looked at it. The soil was stubborn, packed tight by winter, but we dug anyway, one row at a time. Knees in the dirt, hand-stained, no small talk, just effort. We planted tomatoes, basil, a few sunflowers just to be defiant. We called it the quiet corner. And it became ours. We didn't talk about our children often. When we did, it was soft like looking at an old scar. What we shared wasn't pain. It was recognition. And in that quiet space, with soil under our nails and books on the shelves, I stopped feeling like a woman who had been erased. I started feeling like someone still growing. It was a Saturday morning when I saw him again. I had just finished sweeping the front porch. The sun had finally pushed through after days of gray. A car pulled up at the curb, familiar shape, still as stone. Noah stepped out. He looked older, not by age but by weight, no folder, no pen, just a plain white envelope. He didn't come to the door. He sat on the porch steps like he used to, waiting for dinner. I stood at the doorway, then walked down slowly. I didn't sit close, just near enough for the wood to creak beneath us both. He looked up, said he was sorry, that he saw it now what he had done, what it had cost. I didn't take the envelope, I listened. Then I said, I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't come with a key. Some doors, once shut, stay shut, or take time, or never open again. He nodded, placed the envelope beside me, stood, walked away. And I stayed there, not waiting, not grieving, just breathing. Because sometimes healing doesn't mean going back. It means standing still and knowing you are finally home inside your own life on your own terms. And no one gets to write over that.